Okay, and let me just see. Uh,
Donna,
yes.
is it the Cohen or the Goldman
Or-
version that we're using? Because I ended up with both.
This says, um, I have this, like, it's a glossy kind of, yeah, so
Both the
I have,
same.
I have this one also originally from my library shelf, but I bought this one
Okay.
because the commentary is newer. So this
Okay.
is, this is what I'm going to be reading from. And we're on page 8. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we finished chapter 1, in which Hannah was her prayer was fulfilled, and the a boy was born, and we're told about her bringing him, lending him, verse 28 on page 7, lending him to God or giving him to God. So we'll get into those details soon, but the text detours now with a poetic response of Hannah, or perhaps mentioning what her prayer was. So we'll read Alter in a little bit about this, what he says about the place of this poem, and it's written poetically on the page here on page 8 and 9, and on to page 10. You see that the lines are intentionally printed in a way to show that it's, as opposed to verse 7 where the Hebrew is justified, that is, the column is justified. Here, it's not justified, to show that it's different, and it probably in the manuscripts it's written differently too. So we'll read the 10 verses that make up this prayer. Vatit palel Chana vatomar, alatz libi ba'adonai, rama karni ba'adonai, rachav pi al oivai, ki samachti bishuatecha. Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoices with God. My horn is lifted up with God. Alter is going to talk about that in a second. My mouth is widened or enlarged against my enemies, because I have rejoiced, or because I do rejoice in your salvation. So I'm very happy. That's what Hannah says.
Rabbi,
Yes,
this is the same Rama root that was in the Teruma. Is that right?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Ramah, it means to lift up, or to be a high place.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yes.
Teruma and Aliyah, they're both to go up. No?
Now, truma is something that is raised, something that is lifted or raised. Aliyah is the act of going up, ascending.
Okay.
So aliyah refers to an act that a person does. Truma is the object that is lifted.
Interesting, not the same root.
But the going up is a different kind of going up.
Gotcha.
So the teruma would be a sacrifice. It would be lifting it up to make a sacrifice.
So a truma in rabbinic literature, truma is associated with the agricultural offering that is set aside from the harvested crops. So it's 1/10 that is set aside, that is then given to the Kohen. And the act of giving it to the Kohen makes it, sanctifies it, and so-called lifts it up. Okay, so we're on verse 2 now. We were just talking about Ramah in this verse and the different formulations of Ramah, Truma, that kind of thing. This is Hannah's prayer. 2. Ein kadosh ka'Adonai, ki ein biltecha, ve'ein sur ke'Eloheinu. So there is nothing that is holy out aside from God, or that is, God is holy. No, that nothing else is as holy as God, because nothing exists without you, and there is no rock like our God.
So she's addressing God as the Lord, and then addresses him as the second person. Third person, second, back and forth in both these verses.
So she does speak. The only you that is in anything so far is the last word of verse 1. So my heart rejoices with God, my horn is raised up to God, my mouth is widened against my enemy, because I rejoice in your salvation.
In the second verse,
and then the second, there's none holier than God. Oh, there's none other than you.
Right.
Okay, so there's one you in verse 1, one you in verse 2. It's just the way this poem is constructed.
Okay.
So what were you trying to say about it? What?
I don't know what to take of it, because I'm not an exegesis person.
But I don't know. I think she's describing God in the third person and then addressing in the second person a little bit. I don't know. I don't know. We'll read what Alter says about this poem, and if Hannah actually wrote it or not, and when it was written, and then we can talk then about the style. Maybe people were hesitant to address God directly in the second person. Okay, verse 3. Al tarbu tidabru givoha givoha, yetze atak mipichem, ki el deot Adonai, velo nitkenu alilot. So I have to look at the English translation here, because I'm not sure. I know that givoha means high up. Multiply, not exceeding proud talk. So I have no idea what that means. Don't talk arrogantly, maybe. Don't talk proudfully. Yetze atak bichem. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth, because God is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. So don't think just by talking you can get something done. It's based on your actions that God will act. Okay. 4.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Before we go on, I just wanted to mention that verse 2 in the Sephardic service is one of the verses that said when the Torah is taken out from the ark. I can show you here in this.
Oh, okay.
This book. It starts with Romamu, and then it goes.
Oh, I see.
I knew it sounded familiar, but I was able
Very
to play.
good. Very good. So while you have your Siddur out, there is on Simchat Torah, we have the extended Torah service. And let me just find it in the Lev Shalem. Just 1 second here. Just a second. Where would it be? Just give me a moment here. Let me just look in the, because I think it could be one of the verses in the extended Simchat Torah service. Of course, when I want to find something, oh, come on.
While you're looking,
Yes.
one of my favorite prayers, it was in one of the older High Holiday prayer books. It was a Rokesh. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's the one that's, not playing the haughty aristocrat and let your dealings not be admirable of bad people and only strive. Very similar in this. The concepts are the same. I mean, it's interesting how those ideas get sort of recycled in various prayers.
Yes. So,
in that case, it was a meditation, but
right. Okay, so I found it on page 402 in Lev Shalem, but it's not here. It's not one of the verses in our Torah service. So it's interesting, Al, just in terms of Sephardi, the origin of the Sephardi Siddur versus the origin of the Ashkenazi Siddur. What are the differences between them? There's other differences in terms of the Kedusha in the Amida, on Shabbat and holidays too. The subject, the core, is the same in the prayer. It's just the verses used to introduce the subject could be different. How that happens, it's fascinating. Okay, so the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. Okay, verse 4 at page 9. Keshet giborim chatim v'nichshalim azru chayil. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and those girded with strength stumbled or failed, something like that. Okay? Is so arrogant don't have a way with God. The mighty don't have a way with God. 5, Seveim balechem niskaru, ure'evim chadelu, ad akara yalda shiv'a, verabat banim lala. So those that are, they that were full have hired out themselves for bread. In other words, those who at one time were satisfied, like were never hungry, now have to go begging for food. And they that were hungry have ceased, while the barren has borne 7, she that had many children has languished. So maybe that's a comment against Penina, if we're saying that Hannah wrote this herself. And now here, verse 6, this is a fascinating verse that will highlights for me that this must have been written at a different time and just put in here. Adonai meimit umechayeh morid sheol v'ya'al. God causes death, and God brings back to life. He causes people to go down to Sheol. That's the biblical way of referring to being buried underground. Vaya'al, and causes them to come up. So this idea, this relates to the idea of the resurrection of the dead, which is a later concept in Judaism. It's not typically a biblical idea. So here, it's kind of inserted here. So it's unclear when this was written and when it was put in. And again, we'll talk about that soon. 7, Adonai Morish Uma'ashir Mashpil Af Meromeim. God causes one to be impoverished, and God causes one to be wealthy. God makes one low and even raises one up. 8, Mekim Me'afar Dal Me'ashpot Yarim Evyon. This is in our prayer book. Lahoshiv Im Nedivim. It's actually in Hallel. Okay, so instead of Mekim, it's Mekimi Me'afar Dal Me'ashpot Yarim Evyon Lahoshivi Im Nedivim Im Nedivei Amo. So the verse goes on like that in Psalms. So the section Psalms 113 through 118 are known as what's known as Hallel, added to the festival services, so just another form of this verse written in that psalm. So God raises up those who are. He raises up the poor from the dust. This could be another reference to resurrection of the dead. From the trash heap, he raises up the poor to make them, to seat them with princes. V'chisei kavod yanchilem, kila Adonai metzuke eretz vayashet alehem tevel. And inherit the throne of glory, for the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. Raglei chasidav yishmor, ureshaim bachoshech yidamu, kilo vechoach yigbar ish. He will take care of the feet of his holy ones, but the wicked shall be put to silence in darkness, for not by strength shall a person prevail. 10, Adonai yechatu merivav, alav bashamayim yareim, Adonai yadin afsei aretz, V'yitain oz lemalko, v'yarem keren meshicho. They that strive with the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them will he thunder in heaven. God will judge the ends of the earth and will give strength unto his king, or to his kingship, and exalt the horn of his anointed. So
Rabbi?
Yes, go ahead, Dov.
The thing that strikes me about this entire prayer is it could just as easily fit into Psalms. The whole thing could be
right. So or this could be taken from Psalms, like, in other words, this is something that might have been written by the same psalmist who wrote the 150 Psalms, but this just didn't make it in there, but it made it in here. But we have something like that. The chapter 22 of 2 Samuel is almost the exact same as a psalm that's in the book of Psalms. It's almost word for word. So
chronologically,
different. Well, okay. The rabbis say that King David wrote the Psalms. Okay, so King David isn't alive yet, chronologically,
right,
at this point in the story. But I don't have. Oh wait, just one second. I might have Alter's book on. No. I never bought the Alter's complete edition of the Bible, but there he probably points out when and where the book of Psalms was written. But the book of Psalms, some Psalms, for example, on Shabbat, we start the Birkat Hamazon, the prayer after eating, with a psalm in which we're talking about, no, not that one, sorry. During the week, there's this option to read a psalm before Birkat Hamazon, Al Naharot Bavel, on the rivers of Babylon, there we were crying. So how could David write a psalm about being on the rivers of Babylon when he in his life was never in Babylonia? Okay, so the rabbi's answer, well, it was prophecy. He was given a vision of people 500 years later, right? Let's say historically David was around 1000 BCE, exiled to Babylonia 586 BCE. So 400 years after David, he knew that the people were going to be exiled to Babylonia. Okay, so if the rabbis who say that Psalms was written by King David, that's how they have to reconcile that psalm. So there are plenty of psalms that could be clear that they're not from David. But there are plenty of psalms that say Mizmor LeDavid, a psalm of David. Okay, so that since there are a lot of psalms that have that they start with those two words, that's why the rabbis think that all 150 were written by David. Scholars, though, would suggest that there were people in the community who were the poets and the musicians of the artists of their generation. And what they wrote became part of the spiritual speech of the people. And somehow that songbook, or what would say that liturgy, was edited over a period of time into the book of Psalms as we have them. So there could be maybe Kohanim and Leviim wrote some while they were in response to being involved in the worship service in the temple. Maybe other Israelites wrote them as a response to going up to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festivals. Maybe other Israelites wrote them in response to terrible things that happened in their lives, because some psalms are crying out to God about in despair, etc. So, but we really don't know who edited them. We only know that they ended up in edited form into the Bible, and we know that that the book of Psalms, as we know it in our Bible, is there from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we know that at least for 2,000 years, the Bible as we know it has been in the form that we know it. Before the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have bits and pieces, like an amulet was found from the time of the first temple that has the words of the priestly blessing on it. And we have found in archaeological discoveries the words of the Shema and the V'ahavta chiseled into the doorposts of a home. So we know that mezuzah, kind of like that, has existed for more than 2,000 years. But the whole Bible itself, we really don't know, and it's hypothesis of scholars based on the Hebrew, the grammatical structure, the form of the Hebrew, that could be different from other parts of the Bible, and trying to make sense of it that way. Right, like the Book of Esther, Purim's coming up. There's a lot of Persian words in it. The language used in it clearly different from other books of the Bible, from supposedly the time from which the book of Esther was supposed to be written, which suggests that it's written later than the time that supposedly it takes place. So, but we don't know. We don't know for sure. Okay, so this is these 10 verses. Let's look at the commentary on pages 8 through 10 in our book, and then we'll look at what Alter has to say about it. Hannah's song is a lofty expression of religious faith in God's rule and providence. Although immediately occasioned by her own happy change of fortune, she rises beyond the personal experience to a sense of God's universal and moral government of the world. 4 stanzas may be marked off. A, thanksgiving and praise, 1 and following. B, a warning to the arrogant, that's verse 3. C, the abasement of the lofty and the elevation of the lowly, 4 to 8. And D, an expression of confidence for the future, 9 and 10. Prayed. See Jonah chapter 2, verse 2 for the use of the word prayed in connection with a psalm of praise and thanksgiving. All right, so maybe biblical scholars might suggest the use of the word vatit palel, what kind of prayer is that referring to? So there in Jonah, it's referring to a psalm of praise and thanksgiving that follows. That maybe you use the word vatit palel just for that, as opposed to petition. So we don't know. Horn is exalted. The figure is that of an animal carrying its head high and proudly conscious of its strength. Mouth is enlarged, a gesture of exaltation and triumph. My enemies, according to Rashi and Kimchi, Penina is meant. But apart from the difficulty of the plural, this would suggest a personal vindictiveness completely at variance with the spiritual beauty of the rest of the psalm. It may be better to understand the phrase as a proverbial or figurative expression of triumph. Rock, a frequent figure applied to God, expressive of God's eternity and reliability. So see Deuteronomy 32 or 2 Samuel 22. The argument, verse 3, the argument is, do not speak arrogantly, for God has full knowledge of what you do, and your actions are thus appraised by him. Page 9, for the human being, life is full of uncertainty. The strong are rendered powerless, while the weak often triumph in the end. They that were full, etc., the wealthy are reduced to such poverty that they have to sell their labor in order to exist. Ceased, that is, to toil or to be hungry. 7, a round number, equals several. So I don't know. There is this midrash of Hannah and her 7 sons. Okay? So perhaps, this midrash is from the time of the Romans, where it comes to prove the faith in God that Israelites have. So Hannah has 7 sons, and I think the way the midrash goes is that the Romans threatened to kill Hannah, or threatened to kill each of her sons unless she professes faith in this idol or something like that. And then the Romans go on and kill each son one at a time. And Hannah still proclaims faith in God. So if you just Google Hannah and her 7 sons, you'll see where that's taken from. And it's possibly then that's the relationship to this particular psalm, that it could have been from that midrash could have been based on this reference here in verse 5 to giving birth to 7 sons. because we only have Hannah giving birth to Samuel, and we don't. I don't think she gives birth to any more children. So, okay. Has languished, there in the left column there, by the loss of her children. 6, it's probable that neither half of this verse refers to actual resurrection from death. Death and the grave are used figuratively for the depths of misfortune and peril, and life and revival for deliverance and prosperity. See, for great is your mercy toward me, and you have delivered my soul from the lowest netherworld, in Psalm 86. So, well, the point of the commentary is the Bible knows nothing about resurrection of the dead, and that it's the rabbis who create that concept and then look to a verse like this and other verses like this to give the basis for creating the idea of resurrection of the dead. So in other words, scholars think the Bible, any reference to it in the Bible is metaphorical, and it's the rabbis who make it literal. Yeah, Barry.
Does the rabbinic concept of resurrection, was that in response to the rise of Christianity, or was that already in the air that then Jesus ended up?
It was already in the air. So Jesus, being part of the rabbinic culture and his followers as well, it was natural to them to think that he was resurrected, right? So here, in other words, the rabbis are teaching this concept, new to the time. It's taking hold because it's a time of crisis and upheaval with the Roman rule in the land of Israel, and so here are Jesus's followers proclaiming, not only do we believe it, we know it happened with Jesus.
Rabbi, why did the concept of resurrection? Why was the concept of resurrection created? Was there a need on the part of the Israelites?
Yeah. Well, so I think the rabbis definitely base it on Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of Dry Bones. So it's a haftarah for one of the holidays. I don't remember which one. That God tells Ezekiel, take a look at this valley,
Right.
And you see all the bones here. Now turn around and look again. The muscles and tissues and ligaments are being attached to the bones, and they're coming to life. And so this is a reference in the book of Ezekiel itself. This is a lesson about the people in exile who are like this valley of bones, spiritually dead, will come back to life and will live again in the land of Israel. So for the rabbis, the idea of resurrection shows the promise for the future, that even though the time that we're currently living in might be fraught with tragedy and crisis and chaos, there is the promise that even if we die in this time, we'll be brought back to life to a time that will be one of peace and harmony and ideal living. So it's Ezekiel's vision that serves as the basis for the resurrection, and then there are other verses like this one in verse 8 that serve as so-called proof to the rabbis that they didn't come up with the concept of resurrection themselves. It's there in the Bible all along.
But Jews as a whole, the afterlife concept is
right, all from the rabbis. There's no such thing as afterlife in the only, we have the story of which we'll read in a few chapters in Samuel about Saul being able to go to the witch of Endor, who's able to bring Samuel's spirit back to life. So, which begs the question, where is he? And is Samuel's spirit out there somewhere? But we have no idea. The Bible doesn't talk about that. That's the only cryptic reference that we have, that somebody's soul or spirit exists independent of the body after the body dies. So we don't know. The rabbis put it all together in the ideology that they created for us, that we now have a sense that our body is a combination of body and soul can live independent of body and does so after our body does, and will be reunited with our body in a healthy form when the Messiah comes and we're brought back to life.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have to believe in that? For me, there's no reason not to believe in it. So my belief in it is in such that, do I firmly believe that God will do this? I don't know if I firmly believe, but I have no reason not to believe it. Okay, so it's kind of a half-hearted belief in it. And traditionally, Jews are supposed to believe in this idea of the resurrection of the dead. Okay, so verse 8 in the commentary, the first half of the verse is to be compared with Psalm 113, verse 7, which, like I said, is part of Hallel. That is about raises up the poor out of the dust. From the dunghill, I said the trash heap, in the east, beggars and lepers sit there and solicit alms. Throne of glory, perhaps better seat of honor, the place occupied by elders and leaders in the gateway of the city. For the pillars, etc., since God created the world and maintains it, God has power to arrange the fortunes of men in accordance with God's will. Holy ones or pious godly ones, not by strength, but by the divine will. And I'm on page 10 now, verse 10. King, anointed, these are parallel and in this context synonymous terms. It has been alleged that the mention of the king stamps this song as of later date, posterior to the establishment of the monarchy. This is by no means the case. The idea of a king was not altogether novel to the Israelite mind. The promise to Abraham spoke of kings among his posterity, Genesis 17. The Mosaic legislation describes the method of election and duty of the king, Deuteronomy 17. Gideon had been invited to establish a hereditary monarchy, Judges 8. Amid the prevalent anarchy and growing disintegration of the nation, the desire for a king was probably taking definite shape in the popular mind. So that's this person's thought here. If you dare you think that the poem, that proof for the poem being written at a later time from these words, that and exalt the horn of his anointed, before that, he will give strength unto his king, and that is that therefore proof that this is written in a time of kings. No, it's just a metaphor, and it would be natural to think that that Hannah could have been thinking about kings in composing this prayer. But let's take a look at Alter and see what he says about this. So on page 247 in Alter's Ancient Israel. So, and then you see in the English right there on the page how he has arranged this poem and prints it, just to show that it's a poem different from narrative prose. According to the standard collage-like convention of biblical narrative composition, Hannah's psalm has been set into the story at a later stage in the editorial process than the original tale, and it gives evidence of having been taken from a familiar repertoire of thanksgiving or victory psalms. The reference to the anointed king at the end of the poem assumes the institution of the monarchy, not established until 2 generations after the moment when Hannah is said to have pronounced this prayer. It is clearly the invocation in verse 5 of the barren woman who bears 7 that encourage the introduction here of this particular text. But the larger thematic assertion in the poem of God's power to reverse fortunes, plunging the high to the depths and exalting the lowly, is a fitting introduction to the whole Saul-David history. So, in other words, David, a lowly shepherd, becomes king. Saul, who became king, then commits suicide. This psalm and David's victory psalm in 2 Samuel 22 echo each other and act as formal bookends to the extended narrative sequence that includes the stories of Samuel, Saul, and David. All right, so that's an interesting point too. So here in chapter 2, we have this poem, psalm, and at the end of the book of Samuel itself, in the 2nd Samuel, we have another extended psalm too. Okay, so that's just his assertion is that this is from another body of literature written later, inserted here by the editor of the book of Samuel, whenever that editing took place. So, my horn is raised high. This archaic Hebrew animal imagery is worth preserving literally in English, as did Tyndale and the King James Version. The idea seems to be that the animal's horn is its glory and power, held high perhaps in triumph after goring an enemy into submission. There is a sequence of body parts at the beginning of the first 3 verse sets of the poem, 2 literal and the middle one metaphorical. My heart, my horn, my mouth. The raising high of the horn is crucial to the thematic unfolding of the poem, which reiterates a pattern of vertical movement, elevation, and descent that manifests God's power to reverse the fortunes of humankind. The upraised horn at the beginning returns in the envelope structure of the last line, a prayer that the Lord raise high his anointed's horn. That final image, in turn, involves a hidden pun because the Hebrew horn, keren, actually one of the rare Semitic terms, cognate with the Indo-European cornu, horn, is also the receptacle containing the oil with which the king is anointed. Okay, on to page 248 below the line. My mouth is wide to bolt down my foes. The Hebrew does not express but implies bolt down. The conventional rendering of this idiom as gloated is an evasion of its intimation of predatory violence. Shattered, the verb used is restricted to poetry. A noun derived from it means rubble or tiny broken fragments. Hence, the sense seems to be more extreme than the standard term to break. The hungry cease evermore. The Masoretic text is rather cryptic. This translation revocalizes the last Hebrew word of the line ad, until, or by a long conjectural stretch, pray, as ode, an adverb indicating persistence through time. The Masoretes attach the word to the beginning of the next clause, where, however, its semantic function is equally unclear. To seat among princes, the language here might anticipate the monarchic flourish at the end of the poem. Throne, kisei, in the next line can mean either throne or chair. Robert Polzin has made an elaborate argument for seeing not only Hannah's prayer, but all the early chapters of 1 Samuel as a grand foreshadowing of the fate of the monarchy, with the old and failing Eli, who will die falling off his chair or throne as a stand-in for the Davidic kings. The wicked in darkness turn dumb. The verb obviously refers to death. The underworld in other psalms is sometimes called Duma, the realm of silence or speechlessness, a noun cognate with the verb yidamu used here. Those who talked high and mighty, their mouths spewing arrogance, are now forever silenced. And verse 10, the Lord shatters his adversaries. The Masoretic text, Lord, your adversaries are shattered, but the Samuel fragment from Qumran has God as the subject of a verb in the singular, a difference of only one letter, with the adversaries as the object. This makes better syntactic sense, especially since it is God who is thundering against the enemies in the second half of the line. The verb shatter is the same one used for the warrior's bow in verse 4.
Jonah,
Yes, Bess.
has anybody here or known of Robert Alter speaking or extemporaneously speaking? Does he talk like this?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't heard him lecture in any context, and he's based out in Berkeley. So no, I haven't heard him, so I don't know if he talks like this. And if he did, I'd hate it because I wouldn't understand anything that he says.
He has to repeat each sentence twice before
Right, exactly. All right, folks, it's 10:17, and let's stop here for today because we're getting back to the narrative now. So let's save that for next time. So next Friday, March, yes. So we're on for next Friday. The Friday after that is Purim. So we have a service at 8 o'clock on that Friday morning of Purim, and it might run late. Like it might be more than an hour and a half because of how long it might take to read the Megillah. So it might be that, the link will be on. It's the same link that I use for services. So it's possible when you come on at 9:30 that we'll still be finishing up with the service. So just forewarning, a couple weeks from now we might be starting late for class. Okay.
Can we make it 10 to 11? Is that a possibility?
We could do that. So let me send that out in the email today with the recording, and then people can vote to see if they want to do that. Okay. Yes, Ron.
Just one quick thing following up from last week about face versus faces.
Oh, yeah.
I think the reference might actually be faces, as the point of reference might be better as faces in the plural rather than singular, because we present multiple faces under different circumstances, and our faces display our inner thoughts, sometimes inadvertently.
Right.
But
Yes.
So the compression to a single face is probably a disservice.
Right. Or the fact that our face can take different forms, like we can just do something with our mouth or our eyes, and then we have a different face. Yeah, and it could apply to God as well, to represent the different aspects of God that we might be praying to and to kind of connecting with for help and support. Yeah, so very good. Thanks. All right. Have a good rest of the day, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Good Shabbos.